through what you've been doing here.
Did you get the one I sent just maybe an hour or two? Okay, good.
Yep.
Yeah, I woke up in the middle of the night with realizing a couple things I'd forgotten. So anyway, I kind of forget where we left off, but I think we had talked about Taeniandrena and Scrapteropsis, which are couplet 28, the males.
Yep, and we went down to where you just had a whole clump of things that weren't talked about. So yeah, Taeniandrena males are reasonable to ID as a group, but I almost never am identifying them to species.
Yeah, it's a challenge, definitely. So, I mean, I think if you're convinced you don't have Taeniandrena or Scrapteropsis males, and those would be kind of unique at this point in the key because the dorsal part of the propydium is really reticulate and usually has part of the carina separating the dorsal part from the posterior part.
Yep.
There are a couple other species that and Barbalabrus males, which we'll get to, have a kind of a roughened dorsal propydium, but they don't have a carina. But that's one that can confuse people. It confuses me. The next thing in couplet 29 is the vertex and how long it is in relation to the diameter of an ocellus, which can take some getting used to and often requires some higher magnification maybe than you might be usually thinking of. And sometimes a very close look, because sometimes the difference is, is the vertex length greater than the diameter, or is it the same, or is it less? Sometimes those are very, very small differences. Right. They're real, but you just sometimes have to see the whole spectrum in order to finally see what's meant. So.
Right, and also you have the problem sometimes of the back edge of the head or the vertex is there's a curve, right? Yeah. So you change the angle a little bit, and the distance, the apparent distance differs, and so so it can become, if it's close, you can shift from one to the other.
Yeah.
Now, in Discover Life, we tend to, if it's close, then we score it for both things. But in a more dichotomous world, you usually try to put things into tighter packages.
Yeah, and in terms of a dichotomous key, when you come to a couplet like that, where you're not sure, is it longer, is it not? I frequently just end up going both ways, taking both choices, going both ways in the key, and just with the hopes that, well, something else will appear that's very definite. So that's just one strategy. So the next two subgenera, Melandrena, which is a big group, and then Taeniandrena, which is just it's the exotic, the introduced species, Andrena wilkella. Both of those have a pretty broad, a pretty long vertex. I think most of us, it's pretty obvious, most of those. There's one or two species of Melandrena where it gets really close, and Confederata is one of those.
Right.
And that's not very common, but it's still.
We get it regularly.
Oh,
it's
okay.
It's sort of it's uncommon but regular in the late spring.
So those two groups are easily, if that's where you're at, those two are pretty easy to separate. Again, most of the Melandrenas are spring or late spring, maybe early summer, and at least in the Midwest, Taeniandrena wilkella is midsummer or even later.
Right.
So there's that can help, and it's not in the key, but so seasonality sometimes is helpful. So in the Melandrenas, there are a bunch of them, and the males can be challenging. In general, they're big, relatively speaking, but they're not all. I find sometimes you just have to Be comparative. Look at different
right?
different examples and finally realize, oh, this one's this one's that.
Yeah.
There are a bunch of them.
I'll take you to, we have a spreadsheet that Claire has put this up here for Melandrena males, because a lot of it really is comparative and it's sort of a weight of evidence thing. And it's not, yeah, it's pretty tricky to use a dichotomous key on this, because there's a lot of shadings and a lot of this and this need to be present kind of thing. So you can see these are just our Eastern ones here. And you can see that we've highlighted what are key characters for each of the groups. And that we do use things, a lot of things that are not super definitive, but can be helpful. Like Komoda has a 1-to-1 length by width on F2, and the others are mostly 1.5 to 1. But, that's can be subtle. We have facial hair color that can be useful, because sometimes there's black in the face, particularly Carlini is something that pops out. Label process can be useful, but a bunch are in between. And then T3 hair, vertex heights, all kinds. There's actually a lot of characters, but it's the package, and you end up having to look under the sternites quite a bit. And so anyway, I just letting people know, rather we could have a whole Melandrena day. That would probably be really useful, because they're very common, and you often get males and bulls by the bucket load.
Yeah, and like Sam said, it's very few of those Melandrena species can be identified based on one character. It's a suite of characters, and it's sometimes hard to keep all that in your head. So it's nice to have a table spreadsheet like that.
Yep.
To remind yourself. That's very good.
Here's on screen. This is wilkella. So just to show that when you get in close, you can see that there's just an unbelievable amount of pitting on there. And this is a bad shot for looking at the vertex, because it's askance, but you can see, that it's pretty relatively short in there. And yeah, and then these pits run all the way to the edge, and it's very dense.
Both males and females have that really dense, fine pitting, and none of the Melandrenas have anything like that.
Yep.
So it's a pretty unique species.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, I should also mention that PIC has changed things on the Discover Life guide, so that when you actually click on the pictures, you don't get tiny little square magnified. It blows the whole thing up. So an improvement in and I think at a higher resolution too. We're talking 20 years ago when he started all this. So things have changed. It's not dial-up land anymore.
So
okay.
Melandrena and Taeniandrena wilkella, pretty straightforward in terms of separating those two groups. But after that, from couplet 31 to the end of the key, these are groups that are, for lack of a better word, just tricky. And a lot of these subgenera show up repeatedly, because it's hard to find characteristics that 100% identify the subgenera. So what you've got here is kind of a hodgepodge, and so some of the subgenera show up several times, which is kind of frustrating, but I didn't know any other way to deal with it. So at 31, you have, we've talked about this before, the reflex nature of the apical margin of the sixth sternite. And of all these groups and species that follow from 31, there's only one, and that's bisalicis, that has a strongly reflexed S6 apical margin. The rest, everything that follows even other things that are in the same subgenus do not. So that's a unique character in this part of the key for that species, and it's fairly common species, at least in the Midwest. I don't know if you have any images. So anyway, so that's a unique character. That's all you need to see if you're in this part of the key. That you've got a specimen that's got that strongly, very obviously reflexed. That's margin X6. It's going to be bisalicis, which is a spring species, pollen generalist. And Samuel, we're not hearing you.
See, I must have clicked on something.
Oh,
anyway, I'm going to show bisalicis male sternal characters here. Let me just change it so that the pin isn't running exactly through it. We've talked about this before, but the upturned nature of the last turtle segment or sternal segment is really a great character, particularly in comparison among like two closely related things that you're not quite sure about. Let me put this onto full screen here. There we go. And oops. So this is looking straight down. And you can see, first of all, just again, pointing out tricky things that took me a while to learn. So there's S8. And so that's, it's not a great angle on it, but it's probably entire. Sometimes it's forked, sometimes it's flat, sometimes it's large, sometimes it's small. So that can be useful. And if we go down, S7, I guess, is never really used and maybe tucked away. It's not part of the dialogue. Here's S6, and here comes up that there's hair along this area. So sometimes there is, sometimes they're not in these species. But here's this rim right here. It's completely turned at almost right angles facing us. But if you were to show the bee in the right angle, it'd be turned down. But you can see this upturned rim in that area. I'll try and flip it to the side because it's an important thing to be looking at in Andrena specimens. And can't think of anything else. I mean, different bees do different things on the posterior edges of sternites and stuff, but this seems to be a Andrena thing to have this upturned area. Not aware of it being used elsewhere.
There you go.
So you're looking at there's some hairs in here, but you can see so there's S8 again. Looks like it's entire to slightly convex. And here's S6 running, this is S5 running up to here, and these are the hairs in front of it, and we're looking at it laterally, so what we're really just going to see is one edge of it. It's looping across the entire back, and this sclerotized part of S6 is turned up pretty much at a right angle to the rest of the base, and so that's the diagnostic point. We don't see the species that much, though. I think it is dirtball in Midwest, but not so here. It may be that we're not getting out early enough and not paying enough attention to tree things or nesting aggregations.
Yeah, I've noticed that. I mean, a lot of the graduate student specimens or projects that I've worked with over the years, they usually don't start collecting, this is in general, until classes are over, so
Right.
They miss the early part of the season, and I mean, that's maybe can't be helped, but partly that explains maybe the absence or the rarity of some of these early spring Andrenas. The people just aren't out there getting them, looking for them. So.
Right. And in the old days, you didn't really have grad students. You just had people, collectors, and they were after, you know, they were ready to go. Early
Yeah,
spring, time to get out of the house and start, you know, getting new records and such. So I think some of our problems with rarity and changes are just a reflection of different
yeah,
habits that people
you're right.
had in the two time periods in terms of their what and where and how they collected.
So that's Andrena bisalicis or bisalicis. Um, so couplet 32, um, this is we're talking about the mouth parts, the galea, the blade-like structures that are between which is the glossa. So the galea are the sword-like or the blade-like things that stick out, the flat usually, maybe a little bend to them. But there's a group of species in the subgenus Euandrena that have the galea relatively narrow and long and pointed relative to most other Andrena. And again, this is usually something you have to see, because when we say narrow, what's that mean? Different things to different people. But once you see it and recognize it, it can be helpful if the mouth parts are visible. And of course, that's a big if sometimes. But it's a great 100% character. That's why it's in the key. That if you can see it, well then boom. So there, in the Midwest, there are, and I think to the east too, there are 3 species: Droege, Facilii, and Polomonii, that have the galea like that, and both sexes do, males and females. And these are again fairly early mid-spring species that are specialists on certain plants. So you have to, go out and look for them. And sometimes there's a slight bluish cast to Droege and to Polomonii and even to Facilii, but it's very subtle. And under different lighting conditions, it can look different. So, I mean, that's helpful, but it's not always diagnostic. So, mouth parts are important, and if you can't see them, well, you're going to figure something else out, because that's the only thing I put in the key at that couplet, because it's 100% if you can see it. And
which is hard for us people who don't pull anything out, because like I'm looking at these specimens now to see if I can get any that show it. And yeah, okay, got one here. Because a lot of times the head is the head angle and a variety of other things. So this is Andrena facilia. And where did I collect this? This is from Kentucky. And we just don't have much in the way of facilia here. But it's there, but we haven't looked at it. So we have almost none of these facilia species records, as I mentioned earlier in that discussion. Okay, so let's see if I can get this in there. Yeah, very busy here, unfortunately. Why is that not coming out so well? Something is over the front edge. Hang on for a second. Oh, it's a bit of the mandible.
But one way to get a kind of a handle on this is if you look at, say a common species of Andrena, Crescenii, or any of the Melandrenas, look at their mouth parts, and you'll kind of get a feeling for what the normal galea is like. and that's can be a starting point.
Yeah, I've got so long that it's turned up and twisted, and I have to get a different specimen. It's just a bad view. But I would like to show it. It would help if I looked in the right box. Yeah, I'm not sure I'm going to get a specimen that doesn't have a lot of things going on in there. Yeah, I'll do another quick look. So go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, and the blue tint or the blue casts or the blue overtone, that's not in the key, but if you see it, and that's, at this point in the key, those are the only species that are going to have that kind of a shimmer or a bluish overtone. And with Geranii, it's usually pretty obvious of the three, but it shows up in all of them to a slight degree. So it's something that to keep in mind. Probably should put that in the key and just as a reminder.
I would say in Pulmonii that it's more of a green than a blue. So Geranii, yeah, definitely blue, and of course there's a couple species things going on in there that the Bees of Minnesota thing that you guys put together is illuminating that there may be more than one Geranii.
Yeah, I think there is.
Yeah, I cannot show the head. They're all tucked too far in, which is a problem. So yeah, maybe having a little note about the shininess, because that may be your only option.
It can be useful. Yeah, it can be useful. And again, if you could, if you're not sure, you could just continue on in the key and see if hopefully something else will show up. Well, if mouth parts aren't bad enough, the next couplet,
right?
Yeah, we're talking about the genital capsule, and the penis valves are those things in the middle. And the reason I put them in there is because, again, it's 100%. If you can see it, that's all you need to see. But if you can't, then this next group of species becomes pretty tricky, unless you have all of them, and then you can therefore see the differences. So all the Euandrena have pretty narrow penis valves all the way to the base, and including those that have the narrow mouth part. So it's a pretty unique subgenus, but there's no single character that identifies it. So if we are lucky enough to be able to see the penis valves, or just we think we're going in the right direction, then it becomes a little more straightforward. We've talked about S6, but S2, S3, S4, and S5 in many males, there's a fringe of hairs that can be short, can be long, can be dense, can be absent, that can be pretty useful in certain cases. And so that's what couplet 34 is trying to get at. And those have typically been called fimbria, apical fimbria. The tergites, we call them fascia, but on the sternites, basically it's the same location. They're along the apical margin, and they can be a very, very useful set of characters. So these two that Thysandrena and Leucandrena, w-scripta and barbalabus, both have sternal fimbria that are pretty, I think we'd all agree, oh yeah, that's what they are. They're there, we can see them. And the other two, a couple of 36, Nigerherda and then the Simandrena group, they don't have anything. They may have a few hairs, but nothing that we would call fimbria or fascia. So that's a good separation, I think, in those two groups. But other than that, they don't. I mean, they all look very similar, very streamlined. There's nothing outstanding about them. They're all dark, narrow, Andrena males, and they can, until you get, at least for me, until I got accustomed to seeing all of them, I think, well, okay, now I get it. But it can be pretty confusing at first, but they can be common also. I know barbolabris can be very common, at least in the Midwest.
Question in the chat. Does w-scripta not also have the narrow penis valve?
Did you hear that, Mike?
Not all of it.
So the question was, does w-scripta also have narrow penis valves?
No. I don't think so.
It shouldn't. Did they? So do you have, are they saying they have contraindications?
Verbatim what I asked. Bonnie, I would love to hear more to the question.
Okay, Bonnie was, so she's suggesting that she has specimens of w-scripta that have narrow penis valves?
No, I am not.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I mean, and broadened is a relative term, and I definitely, some of them are more broadened at the base than others, and so, but the Euandrenas are just narrow the whole way, and they don't broaden at the base even a little bit. So all the others that follow from cup of 34, 35, and 36, the penis valves towards the base broaden enough, I think, that we'd all agree that, okay, those are definitely broadening a bit anyway. I don't know if that helps.
Okay.
But
I guess I'm confused because you said earlier that all the Euandrena have the penis valves narrow throughout, but then Euandrena w-scripta doesn't. Is that, that's correct then?
I misspoke. That's the one exception.
Okay.
And yeah, thank you for pointing that out and correcting me. Yes, so that is the one exception, and this is the one case where they're not greatly broadened, but they broaden enough that I think we both agree that, yeah, they're broad-ish. So
thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, so a lot of those, so barbolabris is regular if you're in the north, but not like where we are, we get it pretty uncommonly. But the Simandrena, the Andrena nasonii here, which is really, really, really common. Like it's one of the most common ones. And the males are also very common, caught in bowls, caught in netting, lots of different kinds of situations. Its sister taxa, wheeleri, is much less common, seems to be restricted to more the mountains where we are. But and nasonii, if I have a specimen of Andrena that seems really, really plain, I am like immediately start thinking about nasonii, and the propodial triangle is pretty similar to the female, and I see a very equilateral triangle filled with minute roughness, or it sort of has a look and feel. It doesn't really change from the base to the tip in terms of the surface sculpturing, but it is sculptured, but it's not striate really. Then I'm like, okay, I'm on it. And then the first two antennal segments, flagellar segments, have a look to them. I can't quite describe, but there's like a dark patch that partially cuts across one of them. And then there's the little projection on the middle of the, you have to flip it over, and in the thorax, if you can see it, there almost always is a little tiny nub. It's really strange. Like, why is that there? It seems it has no purpose.
And it has a good name that makes sense. It's called the subpleural signum. So subpleural means just below the pleura, and the signum is a little mark. And Sam's absolutely right. If you can see it, wow. But sometimes it's obscured by a leg or something. But it's always good looking for.
Yeah, and it's surprisingly, once you kind of have seen it once or twice, it's very often visible. Like you can almost, you just start scancing the specimen back and forth upside down, and you can find it because this is the reason why it's at the very end, right? It's such there's not a lot else going on for this species. So if I have something that is super plain and I can start fitting together these things, and then I can see that signum, then like we're good. and usually there's females around, or usually it's in some beat up habitat, which helps, but it's a common species.
And Wheeler eyes, it's the same way. I hardly ever see that species. It's upper,
Okay.
upper Midwest, and I mean, it's not, I just don't see it very often. And,
Yeah.
But it's very, very similar.
Yeah. I think it largely lacks a lot of the turtle bands, if I remember right.
No hair bands.
Yeah.
Right.
So, all right.
Sam used a good word to describe this last part of the key from couplet 31 down to 36. He used the word plain, and that's a good way to describe the males of all those species that are in that part of the key. And that's not to knock Andrena, it's just that these are plain looking males that don't have any immediately outstanding features. So,
Yeah.
good word.
Yeah.
Good word.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think we're at the end of the subgenera as defined by Laberge and the traditional people who actually looked at morphology rather than genes key here, which will be useful pretty much forever. And then the molecular stuff will be what it'll be, but they're changing the subgenera, as we've mentioned before. So we'll have to reflect that at some point in the guides. But the morphologically based subgenera definitions are useful and still a little tricky, but be aware that they may not be matching up any longer with some of the old thoughts. The new you'll see things being moved around.
Yeah.
So Claire, do we have any questions? I think we're at the,
Yeah.
we're
There's nothing.
you can ask us anything since we have 20 minutes left on the books.
What I heard a rumor of Tripiolis being
Yeah,
next
Yeah.
on the list.
Yeah, I think that would be good. They comes onesie twosies. They have some good characters, and yet there's still, yeah, Molly Reitmeyer's key is magnificent, but there's, as with all large groups of species, there's some tricky parts to it too, or tricky species groups. We have a pretty good collection.
Okay, that's good.
But I'm not sure, did we, I think coming up at some point, maybe with Melissa Spring, or I haven't heard back from, or Claire hasn't heard back from.
I can nudge her again.
Okay.
Because I owe her some pictures. But
With Sandra.
yeah. But Melissa is ready to come on and show us the diagrams that she's drawn for Serotina. So I'm lining that up maybe within the next couple of weeks. It sounds like our Leucioglossom team might be able to start if we wanted to do a consecutive series in early September, but I need to figure that out. So those are the two things that are on the agenda coming up.
Yeah, so we're going to have Joel Gardner, Jason come in some pattern that we're not quite sure who's going to be able to attend when, and start with the subgenera of Leucioglossom.
Sooner. The subgenera might start.
Okay, might be pretty soon. And I think it was Jason was mentioning that maybe there's going to be some changes in the subgenera again too. He alluded to that. But right now, it's good to start with the current subgenera because they're pretty easy to classify and helps divide up a very complex group.
Mm-hmm. That would be good.
And then if other people have other species groups they want us to cover, they should hold. I want to do Nomata, but my whole Nomata collection is at the Smithsonian. I saved almost all the specimens, and that'll be a fun group, but we're going to repatriate some of that back here and we'll cover it at that time.
Yeah. I had also recommended, not I, as in me, had recommended that we go through, maybe with the Andrena, instead of maybe going one by one, but go through tricky couplets at a time. So,
Oh, like the Melandrena and
Yes.
Andrena groups, we could go.
yeah, go through, instead of going like all the way through a key or all the way alphabetically, like we've maybe done some of the other ones, go through in those those groupings. So that's another option for where we take these sessions.
Yeah.
But for right
A lot of people end up in mysterious groups of specimens, like we were talking by email, Morrisonella versus Imitatrix, but there's a whole series of, and then some of these cryptic species that are now kind of being flushed out with molecular data, Geranii, Vernalis, and Zizier.
I specifically asked about that group.
Yep. So it doesn't seem like we're going to run out of areas to cover for bee identification issues.
So do you want to tie this up in a bow today, or do you want to move on to the Trioepilus? It doesn't look like anybody's sending messages in the chat.
Yeah, I don't know if we want to really start with Trioepilus right now at the end, or maybe we should wrap it up.
Let's wrap it up. If we have that in there for next week,
specimens together
to get us in a row about what's going to happen with the Leucoglossum series.
Yeah, it would be nice if we can find. I'm not sure if Molly's publication, her major revision, is available to the public, or was there a paywall behind it? I think it was Zokeys, but I can't remember. But in any case, it's worth trying to find, and maybe Claire will get a link to the Zokeys one. It's a really nice, very nicely illustrated. A lot of that then was translated into Discover Life, but it's always good to have the revision too on all these. It's always good to have multiple paths to identification.
I have a 2008 publication. Is
that should be it? Should be like revision of North American Trioepilus.
A review of the kleptoparasitic bee genus Trioepilus.
Yep, that's it.
Yeah, and she's been doing some additional things, and I think Tom Ornifurco, who we'll also have to invite for Epilus, and Molly are now working on tidying up like the simplex group of Trioepilus and a couple things that she left out because of complexities. So we'll see. I don't think she was using molecular data, if I recall, in her revision. It was straight old school taxonomy from Kansas. No surprise. Well, I think we're good. Yeah, people can, go out and have a cigarette instead of having to stick here till 1.
That's what most of these people are going to do.
Mike, do you want to stay on a little bit and talk about
Sure,
Bees of Maryland with our extra? I don't know. I can delay my cigarette, so we can do that.
Stop recording.